Weimar Republic was in a severe condition near the end phase, thus Hindenburg used a system of the presidential cabinets because a parliamentary democracy proved to be incapable of solving the issues. After 3 failed attempts with Brüning, von Papen, and von Schlüsser, Hindenburg gave Hitler a chance to restore order. After years of killing and fighting each other, Hitler immediately started rooting out the communists with the SA after he was elected, so an initial phase of terror started, where they were arrested in the so-called wild camps and in some cases beaten and shot to death. The most brutal incident was the Köpenicker Blutwatch, from where 500 were arrested with 24 casualties according to newer academics, 91 according to the DDR historians. He further paved his way to establish a dictatorship by 3 laws: Decree of the Reich President for the protection of the German people, Decree of the Reich President for the protection of the people and state, and finally with the Enabling Act. The initial phase of violence stopped around July 1933, and Hitler, while using ruthless methods, achieved what he was elected for in the eyes of the German people. As the memory of the November Revolution and the following communist uprisings were still alive, thus the National Revolution, the unbloodiest revolution in Hitler's words, came to an end. These methods were approved by the vast majority of the German public, especially the police and the military, which modern academic historians confirm. And the Germans have indeed to this day positive memories in retrospect of their effort regarding the recollection of social values, the restoration of order, and bringing about social peace. Robert Gellatley. Much like Lenin, Hitler started immediately using terror against its enemies after taking over power, with the crucial difference that Lenin's enemies were the Russian people, and terror was the essence to subdue them. Omitted in German schoolbooks these days, 1933 is the year of the Holodomor, with casualties estimated from 3 to 12 million people in the Ukraine, where corpses started to litter the streets and parents ate their children in the end because of the wheat confiscation that Stalin ordered. This exceeded even the dreadful famine of 1921 to 22 under Lenin, where similar cases of cannibalism occurred, in some cases Russian peasants selling human body parts. While Lenin and Stalin committed the most haunting atrocities on the Russian people, the international cartel, under the name of Judea, declared war on Germany. Considering international law from a modern point of view, all the crimes Hitler committed against the communists in the National Revolution were still acts of a sovereign nation. No nation was provoked. No laws against Jews were passed. Yet the exact day the Enabling Act went in power, on the 24th of January, after it was passed one day before in the Reichstag, this declaration of war was issued and followed by a medial campaign against Hitler and a boycott campaign of German goods, which further isolated the Reich. Now modern historians argue somewhat fairly that this might have been just sensational journalism and no real evidence of an actual declaration of war, but the boycotts and the medial campaigns still took place and were a great problem for the early Third Reich, which inherited the financial disaster that was the Weimar Republic at the end. This historical event is unique and unprecedented. The powers that be realized their initial plan of installing a communist regime failed, and Hitler would not be as easy to control as they wished, as he proved Swiss action with the Enabling Act, and by that they lost the internal control over Germany as all power went to Hitler, legally passed over from the Reichstag, thus they had to resort to their agents. From this day, all cards were on the deck. The next great war against Germany was decided. So, either Hitler planned to attack all along according to the academic historians, or he was forced into war when the revisionist antagonistic theory is followed. The next war was destined to happen in any case, and they already had their key figure in place to ensure Germany would be equipped for war. After being internationally isolated, Hitler still offered the world peace through disarmament in 1933 with his so-called peace speech. Nevertheless, Germany is ready at any time to take on further security obligations of international nature, if all nations are prepared to do so, and if this benefits Germany. Germany would also be prepared without further delay to disband its entire military establishment in the first place, and to destroy the small remainder of the weapons it has left, if the neighboring nations would do the same without residue. But if the other nations are not willing to comply with the disarmament provisions in the Peace Treaty of Versailles, Germany must at least insist on the demand for its equal rights. Now, whether this offer of his was genuine or not, the question why the other nations did not disarm after it was agreed upon in the Versailles Treaty, once Germany disarmed to 100,000 men infantry, still stands. Modern historians like to argue that because of the SA Hitler set up, but this is still an international paramilitary force. Together with the Reichswehr, this amounted to 400,000 men. The French army had over 4 million reservists alone, and most of the artillery, airplanes, and warships were dismantled or taken by the Allies. The reason for this is it was never intended for the other nation to disarm. This way, the Illuminati ensured Hitler would definitely arm up again, as he was surrounded by enemies with larger armies, so preparations were made to equip for war in the long run, with 2 years' plan, the first mainly redevelopment of the state, the second for rearming the Weimar. The key figure behind the first was the Freemason Hjalmar Schott. He is the best possible candidate for being an Illuminati agent. While this can't be proven, this idea will be a subject for further consideration. He was the president of the Reichsbank in the Weimar Republic from 1921. He first met Hitler together with Göring and Goebbels in 1931, and later again in Göring's apartment with Tyson and Hitler. So are these actual meetings between the Nazis and the Freemason banker Schott the root for what later turned into the myth about secret banker meetings? Warburg. 1932, he started supporting the NSDAP and suggested to 20 members of the industry and Hindenburg Hitler should be made chancellor prior to von Schlesser's presidential cabinet. And he gained the badge of honor later, but was never an actual member of the NSDAP. He invented the MEFO Weichel and was responsible for the first 4-year plan to reconstruct the state and build up the Weimar as a suitable force. The first 4-year plan was not a real plan in the sense. It was the general effort from 33 to 1936 to restore the state and referred to Hitler's statement, "Give me 4 years." The real 4-year plan is the second one from 1936. Still, both are commonly referred to as the 2 4-year plans. The MEFO Weichel was a clever system, but born out of necessity since the international boycotts and the absence of any gold reserves. They used the Metallurgic Research Corporation, backed by 4 firms, where the state expenses are covered and the guarantee was the Reich. This way, all economical operations stayed in the state and were backed up by the German workforce. In the first 4-year plan, due to resource shortage, sometimes Schlock had to infuse money. For equipping the Wehrmacht, the NSDAP had to find unique solutions, like synthesizing rubber and optimizing the production of synthetic petrol through cold liquefaction. But despite some problems and resource shortages, overall this system worked to great effect, and the NSDAP implemented many things that bettered the life of the general German public. The most important were the Winterhilfswerk and the Kraft durch Freud. So overall, the Germans were satisfied with the measures of the National Socialists. By the time the first four-year plan was finished, Germany was a prospering nation, and the issue of unemployment was solved, and even later enemies of Germany confirmed this. Say what you will about it today, Germany in 1936 was a prosperous, happy country. On its face was the radiance of a woman in love, and the Germans were in love with Hitler. And they had every reason to be grateful. Hitler had conquered unemployment and brought them a new economic prosperity. He had given the Germans a new consciousness of their national strength and their national task. The second plan was elaborated with Göring in 1936, but now Schnott seemed to play a different agenda as he was more and more resisted to the second plan and Göring's ultimate goal of autarky by especially building up the nation's peasants. Göring agreed with Schnott to distinguish between an immediate solution and a long-term program. For Schnott and the officials of the Reich Ministry of Economics, the long-term program consisted of increasing exports. Göring and Kepler favored the autarkization of the economy as the long-term program. The long-term goal of the Reich Ministry of Economics was this: the increase in exports implied a slowdown in armaments. This was precisely what Hitler rejected, which was why he wrote the memorandum for a quarterly plan. This plan subordinated the economy to military objectives. Germany had to be ready to wage war 4 years later. Schnott was worried another system like the MEFO would cause an inflation and did not want to further support armament, which does seem to contradict the agent thesis. Wouldn't he either infuse more money or let Germany go bankrupt to ensure it needed to start a war, like modern historians argue? Why was Schnott all of a sudden opposed to equipping the Wehrmacht? Did the Germans learn to use his system to their advantage so that by the time the second plan is finished, Germany would be strong? Also, if Germany gained full autarky by the time the second plan was finished, was there a risk that other nations might adapt the German system? The real reason why Schnott was fired then in 1939 and replaced by an early NSDAP member can only be speculated about, but it speaks against the thesis that the National Socialists were founded by the Freemasons Illuminati as a whole. They used Schnott to build up Germany for war, which was their plan all along for the communist regime. But again, Hitler and the NSDAP crossed their paths because Schnott's system worked too well. They underestimated the work ethos and the ability to adapt and improvise of the German people. Now it needed to be ensured Germany was forced into war. The history of the Third Reich can't be explored without mentioning the role of the Jews. First of all, it is a known fact that Hitler, or the NSDAP in general, were opposed to the international Freemasonic or finance Jewry, which they saw as the world elite at the time. This concept of a Jewish elite is confirmed by Coudenhove-Kalergi. The struggle between capitalism and communism for the inheritance of the defeated blood nobility is a fratricidal war of the victorious brain nobility, a struggle between individualistic and socialistic, egotistic and altruistic, pagan and Christian spirit. The general staff of both parties is recruited from the spiritual leader race of Europe, Jewry. Capitalism and communism are both rationalistic, both mechanistic, both abstract, both urban. The sword nobility has finally played out. The effect of the Spirit, the power of the Spirit, the belief in the Spirit, the hope in the Spirit is growing, and with them a new nobility. So there are at least two groups to be identified within the Jewish elite, the Marxists and the plutocrats. Further, there are Zionists and possible many overlaps between these three groups. Then there are the regular Jewish people who have nothing to do with the elite's mechanisms, like the normal German had nothing to do with the NSDAP. Many patriotic Jews who fought for the German Empire in World War I were greatly disappointed by the overall anti-Jewish stance of the NSDAP. Two German mothers, Christian and Jewish heroes, fought together and rest together on foreign soil. 12,000 Jews fell in battle. Blind party hatred doesn't stop for the graves of the dead. German woman, don't tolerate that. The Jewish mother is mocked in her pain. Reichsbund Jewish mothers, front soldiers. The grave reads, 12,000 Jewish soldiers fell for the fatherland on the field of honor. After the boycott by the international Jews, a German counter-boycott was launched, where individual SA men assaulted Jewish shop owners. These were singular events of SA members, but not the official policy of the Reich, especially by the time of the treaty. Violence against them was not desired by the NSDAP. After the assassination of Wilhelm Gustloff by the Jew David Frankfurter, the NSDAP was greatly concerned with keeping order and especially forbid any retaliation or effort relating to the assassination. Concerning the prevention of riots on the occasion of the murder of group leader Switzerland of the NSDAP Gustloff. With reference to my decree for the prevention of riots, August 20th, 1935, I order in agreement with the deputy of the Führer Rudolf Hess that individual actions against Jews on the occasion of the murder of the leader of the Swiss national group of the NSDAP, Wilhelm Gustloff, in Davos are to be avoided at all cost. I request that measures be taken against any such actions and that public safety and order be maintained. The first real program was the Reich Kristallnacht in 1938. According to the official narrative, Goebbels ordered a nationwide campaign of violence against the Jews to destroy and kill Jewish people and their property. This event is still heavily discussed among academic historians, as there is no real proof of Goebbels ordering the attacks, and many upper NSDAP members condemn the actions. The revisionist Ingrid Weckhardt argues that after the assassination of Ernst Roth by the Jew Greenspan, a group of agent provocateurs instigated the people to attack the Jews, which happened in some cases, but the upper echelon of the NSDAP was not involved, as they had a party meeting and had no knowledge of the orders that were given by fake NSDAP members. Hitler was furious when he heard about the attacks. By express order from the very highest authority, arson against Jewish businesses or other property must in no case and under no circumstances take place. She even explains further that in some instances, the Germans and the Jews united against the provocateurs. History writers tell us that during the Kristallnacht, all the Jews were frightened, meekly accepted whatever happened to them, and watched the destruction of their property with no resistance. The contrary is true. While going through the files on the subject, I found many documents which report precisely just the opposite of what is claimed. The fact is that in many cases, Jews and their German neighbors fought together against the attackers, pushing them down staircases. Street mobs were beaten up and chased away in more than one case. Police and party officers were generally on the side of the Jews. Some Jewish community leaders went to the police stations the next morning and asked the police to investigate the damage done to their synagogues. The resulting police reports are still available in the files today. To this day, there is no evidence to back up these attacks were ordered by the NSDAP, as they were concerned with keeping public order, similar to the behavior after the assassination of Gustloff in 1936. So ultimately, these programs were not in the interest of the Reich, but helped the cabal, as they now would ramp up their propaganda against the Third Reich to present it as a threat to civilization and force it into war because their international reputation was damaged heavily. Besides the expulsion of the Jews from Germany from 1933 onward, the NSDAP and predecessor groups made huge efforts to enlighten people about the Freemasonry, as many books were written about it at the time. They saw the Jewish Freemasonry as the eternal enemy of the Aryan people. So where does this absolute enmity between the Aryans and the Jews come from? Was it simply an obsession by the Nazis that modern historians argue, or is there more behind the glorification of the Aryans? The roots of the Nationalist Socialist ideology are older than the NSDAP and Hitler. Modern historians confirm this as the Folkish movement or the Pangermanismus. These are the actual roots of the Thule Society and the forces behind the NSDAP, and everything which is nowadays associated with National Socialism dates back to the era of the German Empire. This will be explored after the next part about the World War II.